Airfix have been producing helicopters since 1956, and I thought that we would do a deep dive into the 22 toolings they have done, including the future releases that are to come. Airfix have a very rich history when it comes to helicopters. In fact, they've tooled 22 different kinds of helicopter in different scales as well. They have 1/24th, they have one of them. They have 4 1/48 scales, and they have 17 1/72nd scale kits under the belt. And we're going to go through them one by one and see when they were released and when the last time they were released as well. In the comments, just put down any of these helicopters that you have built, whether it's the old style, which are the new ones, and just let me know which one you really enjoyed building. I can tell you now, there's 3 or 4 in this collection that I've thoroughly enjoyed building, and I'd like to hear which ones you've built and enjoyed building over the years. Anyway, let's crack on, because we've got quite a few decades to go through. In the 1950s, there were 3 new tooled helicopters in the range, and straight off the bat in 1956 we have the Westland Whirlwind S55 helicopter in 1/72nd scale. It was a series 1 kit and it was bagged. This kit was released 9 times over the years, not including other manufacturers who had rebagged or reboxed the Airfix tooling. And the last time we had seen it was in 2022, when it was put into the Airfix's Hall of Fame as a vintage classic. Then in 1959, they actually had 2 helicopters in their range. The first one was the Bristol 192, again in 1/72nd scale. That was released back in 1959. This had 8 releases in total. Then last year in 2024, it was added to the vintage classic range, and by that point it was known as the 192 Belvedere. Also that year, 1959, in 1/72nd scale, Airfix released what I believe is their first what if, which was the Fairy Rotodyne. I believe only 2 were actually made of this helicopter. It was something that was very futuristic and never really made it off the ground. First released back in 1959, it was released 5 times in total, and then in 2023 Airfix released it the last time as a vintage classic, and I have one in my stash, and I won't be building it. Now we come to the 60s, and there was a gap of about 5 years, 6 years between the last helicopter that Airfix released to this one, which was the Vertal 107-2, which was a prototype in a Swedish scheme. And once this helicopter went into production, the name changed slightly to the Boeing Vertal CH-46 Sealight, which they did actually release a version of back in 1978. Now, the last time it was released as a kit on its own was back in 1994, but it was in a model set celebrating the history of the Swedish Air Force in 2001, where you could get this particular kit alongside a Draken and the Saab Viggen. But that was it. It's not been seen since then. So if Airfix do have the tooling, could it be a future vintage classic? Then the following year, 1966, Airfix released a 1/72nd scale Westland Scout. Now this one was released 13 times in total, right the way up until 2001, where it became a starter set, believe it or not. So again, we're talking 24 years ago since we've seen this in an Airfix box. Could this also be a prime candidate to be put in the Hall of Fame and become an Airfix vintage classic at some point in the future? So 1967's upon us, and Airfix throw us a bit of a curveball, because this is the first time they did something in a bigger scale than 1/72nd. Of course, it's the 007 James Bond Auto Gyro, nicknamed the Little Nelly, which is basically a Wallace WA-116 Agile, and it's a one-person aircraft designed by Ken Wallace. And it was used in James Bond's film You Only Live Twice. And this was the vehicle that James Bond used to find Blofeld's rocket base, I believe. Anyways, it's been released 3 times in total. Once in 1996, and then again for the final time, 1998, where it was put as a model set, which had the paints, the glue and the brush. I've seen them built. Apparently they are all right to build. There's some issues with the fitment of the landing gear, I believe, but other than that, it is what it is. It was a movie prop, and if you want to go and see the actual movie prop, you can go to the Land Rover showroom in Barton in Cambridgeshire, where they have the actual Little Nelly on display. And if you want to buy one, eBay's pretty rich when it comes to the pricing on buying one of those auto gyros. Right then, we've come to the end of the 60s, 1969. What better for Airfix to release than something that's related to the space race, and that including getting the first man on the moon. And that was, of course, a Sea King in 1/72nd scale, obviously known as a Sikorsky S61. Amazingly, they released this tooling 24 times. This tooling has seen more action than Body Blue. Even Heller had a pop at releasing it back in 1998. The last time you would have seen it was in 2013, when they boxed it up with new decals, presented us with a Sea King HAR3 Mark 43. And that was it. I don't believe you will see this Sea King in a vintage classic box either. You can say it's completely retired. That's because they have retooled it. But we'll talk about that later on in the video. Now we're into the 1970s. And again, Airfix released 4 different helicopters in 1/72nd scale. So obviously they're loving that scale. No 148s at all just yet. But with the 4, it was 1973 when they released 2 brand new helicopters. And first off, we have the SA330 Puma. So Airfix over the years have released this 14 times, and this year, 2025, it will now be inducted into their vintage classic range, and that's a future release. It hasn't been released yet in this vintage classic range, but if you want to order it, you can do. There'll be a link in the description box below where you can go to the Airfix website and pre-order the last time you'll probably see this Puma in an Airfix box. Hi folks, just jumping in here very quickly to ask a bit of a favour. If you are enjoying the content on this channel and you're not yet a subscriber, would you please consider becoming a subscriber? All you have to do is click subscribe, ring that bell, click all to be notified when I release a new video, and it really does help the channel grow. Also, give it a thumbs up, and if you do have any comments so far, leave them in the comments box below because I do reply. Right, back to the video. In the same year, they also released the SA341 Gazelle in 1/72nd scale. Another popular one from Airfix that they like to release 16 times. They've released it over the years, and the last time we saw this kit was in 2012 as a starter set. It was the Westland Gazelle, came with the paints, the glues and the brush, and that's it. We've not seen it for 13 years. Now this is primed to be inducted into their vintage classic range at some point in the future, maybe the next 2 or 3 years, if they still have the tool in. But yeah, not seen for many years. One that I built, I believe, back in the 90s, but it was as a helikit. But yeah, Westland Gazelle. Gone but not forgotten. So, moving on 3 years, 1976, Airfix release the Westland Navy Lynx in 1/72nd scale. 14 times Airfix released this tooling right up till 2005, and that was basically the last time they released it as just a model kit it was seen 4 years later in 2009 as the 100 Years of Naval Aviation Collection, which had the Harrier II, the Fairy Swordfish, the Sopwith Pup, and a Corsair in the mix with this Lynx. And that's it. We've not seen it. Again, I keep saying this, but it's true. Another one that could be in their vintage classic range or meet the criteria of being a vintage classic. But don't worry, this ain't the last time you hear Airfix and Lynx in the same sentence in this video. Yeah, because they go bigger at some point. So, 1978 comes and Airfix released something a little bit different. They release a West German helicopter in 1/72nd scale. It is the MBB Bo 105, and I've later found out that actually means the MBB, Messerschmitt Bocau Blom. They released it 7 times right the way up to 1991, and that was the last time we saw it in an Airfix box. Again, prime candidate here for an Airfix release into the vintage classic range, so maybe in the future, next 2 or 3 years, we may see that in that range. Okay, 1980s, and this is where Scalemates goes a little bit skew with, because they're claiming 6 new tool-ins, but I think there's only 5. I think one's been doubled up by mistake. So let's jump back into 1981, where they release another 1/72nd scale helicopter. The Sikorsky HH-53C Super Jolly Green Giant was released this year, and it had a minimal release because it's only been in an Airfix box 5 times. If you add MPC, that'd be 6, but we're only going by the Airfix here, okay? Now, the last time it was seen was in 1986, same name, Sikorsky HH-53C, and it was never seen again. And I kind of think this is one of those kits where it's been lost, whether there's been the wrong number on the tooling or something. But if they did find it, it would be amazing, because that would mean that we have not seen this kit in 40 years. So would this make this a rare kit from Airfix? Interesting. Looking on eBay, they're going for around 25 to 30 quid. So they're not expensive in that realm. But yeah, it would be something to be seen. It would be nice to see this kit back in an Airfix box if they still have the tool in at some point. Moving on, 2 years later, 1983 was the bumper year for helicopters in the Airfix range. First off, 1/72nd scale Cayman SH2F Sea Sprite was released then. Again, another minimal release. It was only released 4 times over 11 years in Airfix colours. Last time, 1994 in this particular box art. There was one more box in the 1990s with the Airfix Lodilla range, but that's it. 4 times we have seen this, and we've not seen it since. Again, prime for a vintage classic release, definitely, but no one's seen it for years and years and years. So we're still in 1983, and this is where Scalemates have gone a little bit wrong, okay? They're claiming that this kit was released twice, once in 1983 and again in 1984. And looking at the magazine here, the Airfix Collectors Club magazine, constant scale, brilliant club. If you want to become a member, please feel free to join up. The code 03042, come off KA Hormone AC, okay? 1983. So I believe that Scalemates is wrong. If you can go in and remove 1984 as a new tool and just make it a rebox, because the parts are the same, the decals exactly the same, could you do that for me? That's brilliant. But and again, this kit again was minimal release. It was only released 6 times from 1983 to 1992 when it was named Hormone, okay? And again, this is another helicopter that we've not seen in nearly 30 years. So if Airfix would release this kit, it would come under the Vintage Classic. Unfortunately, it's got Soviet marking, so whether Airfix feel comfortable releasing it around now, I don't know. But again, another helicopter that has rich heritage in the Airfix range. Now, 1983 was the year that Airfix went big. They went for a 1/48 scale helicopter, and it was this, the Hughes AH-64 Apache, their first 1/48 scale kit. Now, according to ScaleMate, it was only released twice in an Airfix box. The second time was in 1990 with this box art. Hella released it in 1991. And then as I was doing the research, I was thinking, has it only really been released twice? That I went looking on eBay and I found one in a model set box. Now, I remember those model sets coming out around 2005. And so I got my 2005 catalogue out, had a look, and indeed, they did come out. This kind of model set came out in 2005, and then in one of the pictures they showed the bag inside, and it had the number 4007 on the label inside, in the bag inside the box. So me being me, saddo that I am, I went to my 2007 Airfix catalogue and I looked through the gift sets, and there it is there, the Apache AH-64. So it has been released since in 2007, and it's not mentioned on ScaleMate. I would love to be able to edit ScaleMate so it's correct, but if you do know how to do it, message me on ScaleMate. I'll send you a picture of the box that I've got, and then you can add it to this and then make ScaleMates more accurate. Okay? But yeah, that was Airfix's very first 1/48 helicopter. In fact, it will be nearly 30 years on before Airfix tool another 1/48 scale helicopter. Finishing off the 1980s, we're going to jump back to 1984 when Airfix released a 1/72nd scale mil Mi-24 gunship. They then released it twice after that initial release, once in 1988 and again in 1992. Hella released this kit in 2004, and then there was another release just after. Now, if you do your maths correctly, Airfix was bought by Hornby in 2005. So, who got the tooling in the big divorce? I don't know. If Hella does have it, I assume they will release it. But if Airfix have it, will they release it? Again, it's another one of those, it's in Soviet colours scheme. Not quite the environment to release that sort of kit, I guess. But it would be interesting to know who got that tooling in the divorce. Whether it was Hella or whether it was Airfix. One that we'll only find out whoever releases it next, if you know what I mean. But yeah, interesting that, isn't it? That one tooling that was released again in 2004 by Hella. Who actually now has that tooling? Just saying. And that's it for the 1980s anyway. Right then, into the 1990s. What did Airfix tool during that decade? Nothing. That's right, they didn't tool anything in the 1990s. Okay, what about the noughties then? 2000 to 2009. No tooling whatsoever. That's right, it was a very barren time for Airfix when it came to helicopters. In fact, like I said before, it was 30 years before they actually tooled a new helicopter. But I will put in 2 helicopters that they did release, but they weren't an Airfix tooling. So in 2004, Airfix released the Bell AH-1TC Cobra, which was originally an artillery kit. And basically, they gave this tooling to every Rita Sue and Bob 2 to release. Revell released it, Tamiya released it, Testers released it. Mr. Craft finally got hold of it in 2020. So you can just see how far that tooling has gone. You know, it was pimped out to anyone who would take it. And as I said, Airfix had it in 2004. And one other tooling that Airfix released from Italy was the 1/72nd scale Chinook HC1. And they released this kit in 2001 and 2008. Again, another tooling released by numerous manufacturers, including Academy, and finally Revell. Last time this tooling was seen was by Revell in 2020, but Airfix released it twice. Well, they won't release this one again, obviously, because you know in the future they do something special with their version of the Chinook. So 30 years of dryness. We end up coming to the last decade, so 2010 to 2019, and Airfix did release 3 helicopters in that time frame. So 2012 we're going back to, and Airfix released a 148 Westland Lynx AH7. Overall, the life of this tooling, they have released it 7 times. Now, 5 of them within the first year, because they announced it in 2012 with one scheme, then they released it with new parts and then new decals within that first era, and then they added it to the model sets for the Operation Herrick. Academy got their mitts on this kit, by the way, in 2013, but it wasn't until 2022, 10 years after, they released it again, and they've announced it again as the Lynx AH7 this year. Again, if you want to go and buy this kit, you can pre-order it from the Airfix website, and I'll leave a link in the description box below where you can order this kit. The following year, 2013, Airfix released another 148 scale helicopter, the Augusta Westland Merlin HC3, also with the Operation Herrick Afghanistan release. And this one has only been released once. So 12 years ago they released it. Now, when you talk about rare kits and pricing, now this kit is rare as rocket horse shit. There's no two ways about it. I've never seen one at a model show, to be honest, or a trade show. Looking on eBay, pricing is between £75 and £90 for this kit. We are talking megabucks for this Merlin helicopter. Wowzers. And there's some that's sold listings, and there's a couple on there now for 115. So if you do have this kit and you feel that you want to sell it, then maybe eBay may be your best chance for getting top money for it. Really, it's an expensive kit if you want to buy it, but it's only been released once. So that to me is one of the rarest helicopters that Airfix have in their range that they haven't released again. And we talked about this kit with Dale on Airfix and Chill. If you want to go look it up, I'll leave a link in the description box below, and I'll put it at the end of the video where you can watch that talk with Dale, because he mentions this helicopter in there and his thoughts on whether they should release it again or not. Spoiler. And then we move on to 2015, where Airfix finally retool a helicopter that they've had in their range for years and years. They retired it in 2012, and they redesigned and retooled the Westland Sea King HC4. They've re-released it 5 times right up to last year, when they released it with the Operation Granby and the RNAS Yeovilton schemes. And what a fitting tribute, because the Sea Kings, and I don't think you'll see that Sea King as a vintage classic, the old one, because this new one is basically overtaken what was the old kit. So we've gone through the tinnies, I think that's what they call it, 2010 to 2019. Now it's time to move on to 2020 onwards, this decade. And Airfix kind of started it with a bit of a bang, because in 2023, 8 years after tooling a 1/72nd scale Sea King, they come with us with a 148 Westland Sea King HAS1, which was a stunning kit. They released it a year later in 2024 as a HC4 with new parts, and they also released it at the same time where you could get yourself one of the Airfix coins, which had a Sea King on it. I've got that in my collection. So yeah, they started off with a bang in 2023, which made that their fourth 1/48 scale helicopter. And then last year, 2024, they released their own Chinook in 1/72 scale. Yep, the Boeing Chinook HC1 was released last year, and it came with 3 schemes. Obviously, they picked the Bravo November, which was the Survivor, as one of their schemes, and it was a really, really good release. It actually is a fantastic kit. I've built it. It's a lovely kit to build. Goes together fantastically. And they've now announced it again is a future release, rebox, with new decals this time, but they're doing the HC1 late, and that's also available on the Airfix website if you want to go and buy it. And then for the future, Airfix announced this year a brand new tooling in 1/72 scale, so going back to that smaller scale, not 1/48 this time, but in 1/72, a Westland Wessex HC2. Now, I built the original Frog version, and it's crap, and I've always wanted to build a Wessex, and Airfix have answered the call. There's a few people that would love to build this Wessex. Personally, the scheme's not for me, okay? Now, obviously I'm going to build this kit with this scheme, but what I really want is an RAF rescue scheme. That's what I really, really want, that yellow. I'd love to build that, but no, an Airfix, they'll probably release that 3 or 4 boxing time or something, like, you know. But yeah, they've announced this Westland Wessex in 1/72 scale, and these are available on the Airfix website if you want to pre-order yours, and I think they're due out in the next couple of months, so keep an eye out for that one. So I hope you enjoyed that. There was a lot of research. I've spent hours filming this. I've gone back and forward for scales. I understand ScaleMates does have its errors. If you are a wizard at that, could you please correct the things I've found that are wrong on ScaleMates to make it more accurate? That would be fantastic. I could have done this without ScaleMates. It's very, very hard to find all this information without that wonderful resource that all scale modelers need in their life. Whether you're buying kits and want to know the history, especially the boxings and how many times it's been tooled, that's your place to look. And I think 98% of it is extremely accurate. And as I said, when you come across these little things, I don't feel confident enough to go changing and breaking the database just because I find something wrong. I'd rather somebody else who knows what they're doing go in and do the edits. And if you have done that, please let me know in the comments. That would be fantastic. So, Airfix, 17 1/72 scale helicopters, 4 1/48 helicopters, and just 1 1/24 scale helicopter. If you have any questions or if you have any thoughts about the helicopters in this range, please feel free to put them in the comments. I always reply to comments as much as I can, whether it's a heart or a thumbs up or answer your question. I always try to, but let's have the debate down in the comments. I think Airfix have a very good range of helicopters from the vintage up until now. I think the ones that are coming out now have been impressive, but it's hard to say goodbye to the old ones for me personally, because I've built them in my youth, and I would like to see them at least released one more time as a vintage classic. I have nothing much more to add about this video except to say, if you have enjoyed this video, would you please like it? If you're not a subscriber but are enjoying the content on this channel, can I ask a favour please, and that you do click subscribe, and if you ring that bell, click all, you will be notified when I release a new video. A huge shout out goes to my channel members who help me financially with this channel. If you'd like to become a channel member, click join below and select which membership tier you so wish. We do have a Thursday night live stream just for channel members where we jump on our benches and we talk about scale modelling and just have a laugh and talk about all sorts of things, really. It's a really good evening, so come and join us there if you want to become a channel member. In one of the four corners will be playlists and also the video of Dale talking to us on Airfix and Chill about the vintage classic range and future releases. If you want to go and watch that, just click that box there, and we'll see you in the next video. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you soon.